Hello everyone and welcome to the service. As many of you know, I'm Louise Reeve, I'm chairperson here at Newcastle on Time Unitarians. Welcome to our service. We begin as always by saying aloud the values that unite our community, Newcastle on Time Unitarians. As free thinkers, we don't have a statement of what we all believe, because what we do have is a statement of the values that we hold in common as we journey together. We welcome all who seek the meaning of life and who believe that human spirituality is wider than any one tradition and deeper than any one set of opinions. With a respect for our Christian origins, we seek to explore truths from all sources. Our fellowship gives us strength and encouragement in daily living. And I'd also like to mention at the start my thanks to the Reverend John Carter, on whose Sunday reflections this service is based. For many, a church is described in familial terms, a bit like a family or a place that feels like home, or a chosen family. Today, let's think about reflecting on the way we experience being in this congregation or in another congregation if you happen to be part of another one. Whether you've been here for years, you're just visiting, or you've just started coming, or you come here as well as being part of another service. Let us think about ourselves and our community. What do we hope for and what challenges do we face? Let's think about that as we light our chalice. We light our chalice, this candle, as a sign of our connectedness, our community, and of our journey on this spiritual quest called life. Let's take a moment to reflect on our life and living of this week. What was good and healthy? What was not good or not healthy? What moments, events, conversations, time alone allowed us to connect to another, to life, to that which we might call divine? May the divine unity, truth within, of the journey walk with us today. Amen. For our first reading, here's a piece called What is the Beloved Community? By Reverend Nancy Palmer-Jones, the minister at the First Unitarian Church of San Jose in California, which was written in February last year. Beloved community. Now there's a phrase that many good liberal people have tossed around in recent decades. Often the speakers don't pause to define the phrase. Maybe they assume that we listeners can all just imagine what this kind of community looks and feels like and what it takes to build and sustain it. I confess I'm guilty of this too. But the wonderful thing about being in community with you is that every time I've mentioned beloved community without making it more specific, I'm guaranteed to receive at least one or two questions. What does beloved community mean? Where does it come from, and what does it have to do with Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists? Here then are some partial answers to frequently asked questions about beloved community. Where does the phrase come from? The phrase beloved community is first used by philosopher-theologian Josiah Royce in the early 20th century. Royce created the Fellowship of Reconciliation, an organisation with a beautiful name and mission to which the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. also belonged. And it's Dr. King who popularised this phrase and put some flesh on its bones in his writings and speeches in the 1950s and 60s. What did Dr. King mean by beloved community? The King Centre website offers a great summary of the way of living and being that Dr. King envisioned. He believed this vision to be practical and achievable when a critical mass of people dedicate ourselves, to the principles of non-violence and the well-being of all peoples throughout the world. For Dr. King, the beloved community was indeed about the whole world, not just individual communities here and there. He thought that to bring beloved community into existence, individual people and communities must form a global movement where governments and citizens, faith organisations, non-profits, what in the UK we would call charities or community and voluntary organisations, and even corporations would refuse to tolerate poverty, homelessness, and hunger. The same is true for all forms of oppression and prejudice. In Dr. King's philosophy, when enough of us worldwide recognise that we are all kindred, then we'll be willing to face the truths of our human history of extraction and domination, feel the sorrow and pain that white supremacy and other forms of dehumanisation have caused, recognise our different roles in these systems, change our institutions and ourselves, and find a way to reconciliation, redemption, and partnership. To be successful, all of this must happen through non-violent means. What do Unitarian Universalists say about beloved community? In 2008, the Unitarian Universalist Association's Leadership Council named a powerful poetic vision of beloved community as a place where all souls are welcomed as blessings and the human family lives whole and reconciled. In 2018, the UUA President, the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, added active verbs to her definition of beloved community as a community that practices a radically inclusive and compassionate, anti-racist, anti-oppressive, multicultural, multi-generational faith that acts powerfully in partnership and solidarity for justice and liberation beyond. In her essay in Unitarian Universalists of Colour, Stories of Struggle, Courage, Love and Faith, Yuri Yamamoto, a musician, diversity activist and a hospital chaplain resident, brings beloved community even closer to home, saying, "To me, a beloved community means a sanctuary where all of us can express ourselves authentically and celebrate who we are without the fear of rejection. It is not a place where only like-minded people gather, or where everyone is just nice to each other by withholding their feelings and opinions. In a beloved community, we are committed to candid conversation and love because of our many and sometimes painful differences. The road to build such a community is extremely long and rocky. It may be a never-ending process rather than an attainable goal. For Unitarian Universalists, the beloved community can begin with the local and grow, like cells joining together into regional, national and international bodies." And our author writes, she was thrilled that beloved community became the UUA theme for the month of February 2021, which is when she wrote this. She wrote, "We get to lift up this vision, look at it from many angles and decide what it means to us. And the focus on beloved community could not be more timely, with our country and many of our families deeply divided and in conflict about where we need to go and what we need to do to address the crises that plague us. We all need some guidance. It will take all of us, dear ones, to turn the aspiration of beloved community into reality. Let us join together." And on that, let us now join together in prayer. The words of this, if you want to read along, go on the back of the order of service. Let us pray for our home, a reworking of the morning prayer. Divine Spirit of life, truth within, God of many names and of none. May we know this day that you are a part of our lives and our living. May all that we do, our actions, our duties, our hard, arduous and distasteful tasks, show forth the joy and contentment that we have come to know in our walk upon this good green earth. May we always see the beauty of our home, the world around us, no matter where we walk or what circumstances we find ourselves in. May our hands reach out to all things in love, compassion and understanding, seeking a way to bring healing and wholeness to this suffering, broken world. May our hearts be open to all life surrounding us. When we see suffering and brokenness, let us try to bring compassion, love, and the urge to mend and restore what is broken. May our spirits learn from our earth's many spiritual leaders, so that we too can lead lives befitting people called to divine purposes. We are ones called to be a light, ones called to be a blessing, ones called to serve all life. May we be such a people for such a time as we live, serving the whole of this beautiful world and all that live within it. May it be so. Amen. Our second reading, Garden of Our Soul, by Joan Chichester, from Wisdom Distilled from the Daily, Living the Rule of St. Benedict Today. And Brian is going to read this for us.
One of the most interesting spots in our monastery is its inner courtyard. Exotic flowers grow there in every season, and very few people notice them. Most of the windows that border the courtyard belong to private workspaces. The few public vantage points are in narrow corridors where people need to keep moving by, rather than being able to gather and look. Yet the courtyard is one of the most life-giving places we have. It gives light to the inside of the monastery. It breeds beauty, much like a Japanese garden. It centers the house in peace. And everybody knows it, and few people see it. But without it, the house would be a completely different place. The inner courtyard of our monastic community is seen by few, but dependent on many for that glimpse of beauty we need in life to always see it anew. It seeps in our bones and our subconscious like the fine art of humility. It is there nourishing us quietly and calling us to something more worthy than the distractions of the day. It calls us to reality.
Thank you, Brian. I must admit, I almost want to apologise, and there's an unusual reason for that. You will have seen, I think, on the cover of the Order of Service, that there's a picture of us all in my back garden, which I think, if I remember rightly, is around 2018. I had just become chairperson, and I think we just felt like having a summer party. Actually, perhaps I shouldn't apologise, because I just like that picture. It's nice. But I had intended to use another one. And for this, I have to ask, because this is not a trick question, and there is a relevance to it. Has anyone here travelled by rail from Newcastle to Leeds or beyond?
Yes.
Yeah. Then you will know, if you've been down the East Coast Main Line, that as the train goes through Leeds, you'll see a very large brick square building with a big steel turret on the top, which houses the Department of Health. The locals gave it the nickname the Kremlin as soon as it was built. Anyone who's ever seen it can grasp why. It sits up there staring at the whole city. I actually worked there when I was younger and living with mum and dad in between studying at Durham University. When I went home for the holidays, I would temp there. It interested me because people think of that as a gigantic square brick box, but it's actually not. It's a figure of 8 shape, which you would never know unless you'd been in it. Within the figure of 8 are 2 beautiful square gardens, both with water features, many plants, and many people sitting inside enjoying nature. I had hoped to be able to use a picture of that, but whilst I thought I had one somewhere, I could not find it. So I guess I shouldn't really apologise for using a picture of our congregation, but it's not quite the one I had intended to use, so I'll have to see if I can find that. It's interesting because I suppose one can find beauty and spirituality just about anywhere if you're looking hard enough. And on that note, we now have our next reading. This is A Creative Church by Chuan Seng Song from Third Eye Theology, and Ben is going to read this.
Creativity and spirituality are intimately related.
One cannot do without the other. Traditional society has required certain of its members to behave spiritually without becoming at the same time creative. But liberation is a deeply spiritual matter. Basically, it is the interrelatedness between spirituality and creativity that poses a radical challenge to the institution called the Church. A church with true spirituality is a creative church. It is creative not only in matters strictly religious, but must be creative also in all areas and dimensions of human life. A truly creative spirituality is one that enables us to realize and experience the divine presence in all that we do, not only in religious worship, but also in all realms of our activities. It breaks down the barrier between the sacred and the profane, the religious and the non-religious, the holy and the secular. To encounter other human beings in the rough and tumble of this world, to experience life in the midst of death, and to perceive earning in the face of meaninglessness, this is spirituality.
So I've said earlier, this service was inspired by the Reverend John Philip Carter's service on the same topic. He commented, "When I first walked into Croydon Unitarian Church, my first conflicting response was, this is familiar, and yet not. But I felt at home. I had worshipped with other groups and loved my time with them, yet that sense of familiarity was not as strong as it was with that church on that day. I can tell you why, via theological terms or praxis or basic practices terms, this is so, but that's a different story for a different time. I suspect for many of us, we have a similar feeling or sense of this ideal of a faith home. I hope we find here a calm spirit so that we can explore what faith, spirituality and service can give to us. I also hope that we as a community continue to challenge each other to a greater sense of faith, spiritual depth and deeper service to our communities and our world. So where does it begin? With open hospitality. A faith community that does not welcome the stranger, that is not the Good Samaritan, violates the deep spirituality of its faith and its being. In theological terms, to be able to see within every person we meet, within the very core of all creation, the mark of the divine, what the Christian faith calls the Christ within, so what some call the higher self, what that little spark of divinity within each one of us. To be able to see that, then we as individuals and as a community are opened to receive and welcome those who come to us, as well as we ourselves being opened to receive welcome. Everything we do out of a call to love, no matter how limited or even misguided. Our faith community is on a journey of learning and living and accepting the ultimate welcome, that love that transcends boundaries. This beloved community begins with you and with me. And as we journey together, it grows beyond us to encompass the whole of creation. May we continue to make this meeting place a place of true welcome, a place we can call home. Does that resonate with us? I think that it does. Normally, I work out my sermons quite thoroughly. The situation where someone stands at the front, some waits for inspiration to strike, perhaps it works better for people who are a bit more inspired than I am. I usually need a bit of preparation. Reverend Paul Walker and I, who we've had leading worship recently, were stuck together in a small car, a car in which we both wished that my air conditioning hadn't broken down, and on the way to and from the General Assembly in April, and discussed our different approaches to services. Mine is to write things out in advance. Paul likes to improvise a little bit more like a jazz musician. He knows what chords he wants to play, but he trusts to his own judgment as to which way he wants to play them, which is interesting. Perhaps I'm trying Paul's approach now, because something I know some of us have talked about is thinking about how perhaps we might bring some new ideas into our services. I actually have asked other Unitarians what thoughts they've had. It's interesting to note that so many Unitarians across the UK are coming up with new ideas. Some are doing Taizé chanting, some are worshipping outside, some are doing art within the service. Some have dispensed with sitting facing forwards and sit in circles to share stories. If you're anything like me, some of that sounds, well, I hope, some of it sounds like, hey, that would be great, let's give it a go. Some of it sounds like, that's quite possibly not going to work for me. It's the nature of having a varied community, and one in which I hope everybody feels empowered to speak, that sometimes not everything works for everybody. But I think, and I believe also within our community, we trust each other enough, and we've created a space where people can say, that's not quite working for me. But also I hope in which we'll also say, sometimes we'll go with things that don't always work perfectly for us, on the understanding it works for others, and that in the end, everybody gets their turn. Normally I try and drive at a single point, but in a sense this is more inspirational because I'm thinking of a few things at the moment. One is that sometimes we wonder what the vision is for our congregation here. I'm the chairperson, so what that means is that the vision shouldn't be my vision. I'm supposed to be here ultimately to serve the congregation. Any spiritual leader should be. So perhaps at some point we'll start to think about what is our vision going forwards. Once we've finally sold this building, as we hope we will do very soon, when we can no longer say, right, all our resources are taken up with selling this building, what do we do next? If I had an answer for that, it probably would be the wrong answer because it would be just my answer. We'll all need to think about that one together. Part of that, I hope, will involve what Ben's doing, or at least what Ben is leading on. It's not just Ben doing it, which is the visible sign is marching at Pride to show, I hope, that we are a welcoming community for LGBTQIA+ people and people of all kinds and backgrounds. But that's also part of what happens within us. And I'd like to thank everybody who came along last week and was able to join in the working on our welcome discussion, because we had some fantastic ideas about things we might change or do differently, or even just make a little bit more explicit about how we do things here, just to try and hope that people feel welcome. And we are, I think, very much called to do that right now. When I had that first reading, it dates from February 2021. I was going to try and insert a comment along the lines of, and of course, as we know, in February 2021, we had just witnessed the shooting of, and was struck by the horrible thought I couldn't recall which of various terrible shootings, often of people of colour, had occurred at around that time. So I think I mention that because we don't exist in a bubble. We all know that. We're part of a community, and sometimes that is going to lead to some very difficult conversations. Again, I hope we can all have them. But some of that might be around, does everybody feel welcome? Do the practices we've inherited still work? The reading referred to sometimes difficult and painful conversations. I hope we will have more of them, not because I want us to have difficult experiences and be in pain, but because sometimes the only way to grow is to push yourselves forwards out of the comfort zone. That, I think, will be part of what we can do. And another thing Paul and I discussed, which I think I'll finish up on before, actually no, I think before I finish up with what Paul said to me, let's have some missing verses by Woody Guthrie. I'm not going to sing them because nobody needs to hear me singing a cappella. These are the other verses from the song we just sang. And again, big thanks to David for the fact that I didn't have to go and play the piano. I used to do that ages ago, but let's not try it again now. But Woody Guthrie wrote, "As I went walking, I saw a sign there. And on the sign it said, no trespassing. But on the other side, it didn't say nothing. And that side was made for you and me. On the shadow of the steeple, I saw my people. By the relief office, I see my people. As they stood there hungry, I stood there asking, is this land made for you and me? Nobody living can ever stop me as I go walking that freedom highway. Nobody living can ever make me turn back. This land was made for you and me. From the GA, Paul and I were talking about that obsession of all congregations, not just Unitarians, congregational growth. And Paul asked, why would you like to see your congregation grow? And I said, I'd like to see Newcastle-on-Tyne Unitarians continue, and we need more people for that. And the reason I think we should continue is because I think we've got something to offer the wider community that we're a part of, and I want to see that sustained. Paul said, well, I think the first reason is the one we should ignore, but the second one is probably the good one. So, my thoughts, Paul's thoughts, and Woody Guthrie's thoughts. You can decide for yourselves which ones you find most meaningful. But let us go forwards, walking that freedom highway all together. Put out the physical flame of our chalice, that its light remains within us until we may gather once more. And here are some closing words by Jim Wigman. May our faith sustain us, our hope inspire us, and our love surround us as we go our separate ways, knowing that we will gather again in this beloved community. To all here, to all joining us online, to all members of this community within and without our walls. Amen. May that be so.